The year 2012 will be a difficult one for the European Union, dominated by a deepening recession and the negotiation of a new treaty to govern Europe's future. But behind the scenes, Germany's strong-arming will change the political calculus across the European continent, while rising extremism creeps back into the political system. The European system is not sustainable. There are two pillars of the European crisis. One is government debt, the other is the instability of the banks. As to the debt, you can look at any country to find instability, but the one that really matters is Italy. With debt of 120% of GDP, it is a debt mountain that simply cannot be recovered from, considering the country's shrinking population. Assuming the recent austerity measures by the Italian government stick, you're still looking at a budget deficit of 2.8% of GDP, which doesn't sound all that bad until you can consider that the cost of issuing new debt has almost doubled in the last year. So simply to hold their debt level stable, they need to get from 2.8% in deficit to 3% in surplus. That's simply not possible in any sort of reasonable time frame. So if these austerity measures are sextupled in the next year, and that level of austerity is held for a decade, then you can talk about Italy getting back into sustainable situations. In the tail end of 2011, the European Central Bank launched two initiatives which will stabilize the European system for a time. The first one is an informal pledge to purchase up to 20 billion euro of state debt for the foreseeable future. That is more than enough not just to support Italy, but Italy and Greece and Portugal and Ireland and several other smaller states for the foreseeable future. In fact, it's 3/4 of total Eurozone planned debt issuances for 2012. In that sort of situation, states simply cannot default. Second, the ECB has also started issuing low-interest, long-term maturity loans, unlimited in volume. With that sort of liquidity being force-fed into the system, it's actually impossible for a European bank to fail. With these two problems, at least for now, sequestered, the Eurozone is going to survive for the year, and so is the European Union. But that doesn't mean it's going to be a good year. So what will be happening? There are three things that we see dominating 2012. First is that the Europeans are going to be negotiating and ratifying a new treaty on fiscal controls that will limit how much debt each state can issue, limit what sort of spending that it can engage in, and if necessary, force austerity from the European level on individual governments. It's a very deep intrusion into the budgetary affairs of each member state. Second, the Germans are doing everything to impress upon all the countries in Europe that this is not an optional treaty. The Germans feel that without this new treaty, the debt situation that has boiled up 2 years ago and is still plaguing Europe will get worse and eventually unwind the system. There's a certain credence to that. And so the Germans are willing to use the tools at their disposal to make sure that this treaty gets pushed through. For example, the Germans are the largest export market for nearly every European state. That greatly strengthens their hands at the negotiating table. And last year, they actually helped remove 2 sitting governments from power, Greece and Italy, replacing their prime ministers with unelected European bureaucrats. In 2012, the states most likely to attract German attention are Finland, the Netherlands, Ireland, Spain, and perhaps Greece again. Finally, we see European radicalism and extremism coming to the fore across much of Europe. In a normal year, if you were going to have a treaty that required sacrificing huge amounts of sovereignty to a new German-inspired vision of Europe, and you were going to do so without elections, and if you were going to do so perhaps by overthrowing a few governments, you would have a response at the ballot box, with people voting for traditional opposition parties to make their dissatisfaction known. That's not an option in 2012. There are only 3 election contests scheduled in the Eurozone at present, so you don't have that normal pressure release valve. Instead, we will see far left and far right groups gaining political strength that normally would be denied them by traditional election processes. That is going to be a major problem for next year. But that's for next year.